Hi there, welcome to Alpine Bravo. My name's Brendan. This is my channel for all things Microsoft Flight Simulator, and this is the second part in my series of tutorials on the FlySimware Learjet 35A. In this tutorial, we'll be covering the layout of the aircraft, basically the outside, all the major elements on the outside of the aircraft, and then also the cabin layout and the cockpit layout as well. So let's get right into it. Here we can see the exterior of the aircraft, cold and dark, with all the covers on. Just to note that the traffic cones are not part of the aircraft, they come with the GSX add-on. We'll work our way around the major elements of the aircraft, talk them through, but first of all, to start off, we will just cover the absolute essentials. We can see that the aircraft in the fuselage is split into 4 sections, and I'll just point them out with the mouse cursor. So we have an unpressurized nose section, which contains a radar, oxygen bottles, and various other systems. And then there's a pressure bulkhead, and from there all the way back to stream, I can't remember, stream 36, I think maybe, the is a pressurized section, which includes the cockpit and the cabin and the baggage compartment. Then aft of the pressurized section, you have what's the tail cone, and that is unpressurized, and that contains a number of important electrical systems and various other things. And then right at the end, we have the empennage with the vertical and horizontal stabilizers. The 2 engine nacelles, not much more to say about them at the moment. And then with the wings, the iconic wingtip tanks. I'll go around and look at what's on each wing in a bit more detail in a second. There's one door for normal use. It's a cabin crew door here, typical with these pressurized aircraft, and that's a clamshell design. There is an emergency exit door over the right wing. Okay, let's get the covers off first of all, and then conduct a bit of an exterior walk round of the aircraft. So we've nipped quickly into the cockpit, and we're going to remove the covers, and we do that through the EFB, and we do it by clicking that click spot there, turning on the power, and it will open on the equipment tab here, which is this wrench symbol with the gear cog. And you can see you got chocks, engine cover, pitot cover. So we'll remove the engine covers, the pitot cover, and the front cover, which allows us to see out the windshield, and we'll leave everything else as it is for now. And we'll just turn that off and hop back out the aircraft. So here we now are outside the aircraft. I'll return to the door in a minute, but just a couple of things to point out. First of all, the windshield, that's a 2-piece made out of laminate layers of plastic and acrylic, offering very good visibility. You'll notice that compared to the CJ4. Moving along, we have the stall warning vanes, and then below this is the pitot tube, and it's a rose mount type, which means it incorporates the static ports as well. Then below that we have our nose wheel, which has nose wheel steering, and then there's an unpressurized wheel well for the nose wheel to retract into. You can see there's a panel there, an access panel for the systems that are incorporated in the nose section, and then this part here right at the front, that is the radome. Anti-ice is provided by an alcohol system, which can supply alcohol fluid either to the windshield or the radar, or both. Coming around here, we can see the right hand side pitot tube number 2 and the stall warning vane, and I believe that this here is an unheated static port for the pressurization system, but I could be wrong about that. This here is the wing light, which you'd use for visual inspection of the wing at night to see if there's any ice accumulation, but it also is mounted on the right side to provide illumination for the wing in the event of having to deboard the aircraft using the emergency exit. So it provides some lighting for people getting out. Just carrying on around here, we have a number of antennae along the bottom. I'm not going to confess I know what all of them are. We have the rotating beacon on the underside there, that's beacon light. And we'll just have a look at the main gear. It's a dual bogie main gear, quite robust. And you can see that those are the taxi and the landing lights mounted on the main gear. So, and it's the same light. What the taxi landing light switch does is just vary the intensity of the light. But important point is there's no point in putting your landing lights on below 10,000 feet because they are inside the wheel well. So the land, and it recommends that you keep the operation of the landing lights to a minimum to preserve the service life of the bulbs. So what you would use when you're below 10,000 feet are the recognition lights, which are mounted on the nose of the tip tanks here. And this model has recognition lamps on both tip tanks. Looking at the wing, we have an electrically heated leading edge. This here is a full wing cord stall preventer. That's probably not quite the right term for it. It is essentially it's an addition in the later models of Learjet 35 to help stall characteristic, and this version of the wing has these boundary layer energizer strips mounted on it, which again help with the aerodynamics of the wing and reduce the risk of stalling. Moving around to the tip tank, we've already seen that the recognition light there, which does take up a little bit of the fuel capacity, but it's good to have. And then important thing here is these are the filler port, and you fuel the Learjet through the tip tanks. So the fuel goes into the tip tanks and then it is fed through to the wings and then into the fuselage fuel tank, which is in the unpressurized tail cone section, which consists of, in this model, 2 bladders, and there's a system for basically you have to get the fuel into the wing and then you pump it through into the fuselage tank. We have our navigation light cluster here. We've got our starboard navigation light and a strobe. Just coming to the rear of the fuselage tip tank, we have our static wicks, static discharge, and this is the jettison port for fuel if you need to jettison fuel. And we have our aileron and flap assemblage here. The flaps are 3-position Fowler flap. Aircraft's also equipped with a spoiler, which we can see here, spoilers. In fact, it's a spoiler-on system, so it can be used as an air brake, as a spoiler, but it's also when the aircraft is configured in the normal landing mode, which is flaps fully extended at 40 degrees, you can get augmented aileron effectiveness through the spoilers, and they will deploy asymmetrically as you make aileron inputs. And that is modeled, and you can see that in operation in the aircraft. But it's worth saying that the spoiler-on system is not functional unless the only functions as flaps are fully extended, which is why I'm guessing that for normal operations you would normally land with full flaps. Then you can get the advantage of the spoiler-on system. So that's pretty much it. The major elements of the wing, the engine nacelles. We have an electrically heated anti-ice on the leading edge of the nacelle there, and yeah, I'm not going to say too much more about the engines at the moment, other than to say that the generator, the starter generator for each engine is mounted in the nacelle as well. Just looking at the tail cone, I have a ram air inlet there at the base of the dorsal fin, if that's the correct term for it. And as I said, yeah, there's the fuselage fuel tank bladders are in the tail cone. That's quite useful to know that they're there for weight and balance purposes, because if you're a bit too nose forward, what you can do is add fuel to the fuselage fuel tank, and it can help balance bring the aircraft back into center of gravity limits. The horizontal stabilizer is a single piece, and you can always see it's got its static discharge wicks, and then there's the top rotating beacon mounted on the top there, and then we have the vertical stabilizer with its static discharge wicks. And everything's pretty much mirrored on the same side. Again, I'm not going to try and I think we've got nav1 and nav2 antennas on the top there, and lots of other little details. I mean, they've really done a nice job on the exterior model. Just one little detail that I noticed, which I quite liked, coming in and really getting in close and looking at the riveting. You can see that there's, the paint has flaked away. These aren't rivets, sorry, these are screws. But yeah, you've got that. These are not new aircraft. Typically, they've seen some mileage, and you've got that kind of paint has just flaked off. That's quite. They're not pristine and perfect. Okay, that's pretty much it for the exterior of the aircraft. We'll hop in. Well, before we do that, we'll get the cabin door open and see what that looks like. Getting the cabin door open can either be achieved by using the toggle on the tablet, which is what most of us will do most of the time, but for the sake of completeness, I'll show you how to do it, actually go through the steps, which Flysomeware have modelled faithfully as per the real aircraft. So it's a clamshell designed as OR, so the top part opens first and the lower part then is opened, and there are a number of steps, as I say, that you have to go through. First of all, we unlock the top part. Now there's a motor that pulls the two parts shut to create a good seal, and that is this little toggle down in here. I'll zoom in closer so you can see it. So we operate that, and you can see there's a little gap has now opened up. And now we can now click here, and that's the top part open, and then to open the lower part, unlock the handle, and then there should be a click spot. I think the click spot is here. There we go, yes. And you can see the wires automatically deploy, and it cable dampens it, and it's the same process to close it in reverse. We pull it up with the cables, the handle will close automatically. We find the click spot here, bring it down, then you can see we've got a gap there, and if you just leave it at that, you will get the red door warning light on the glare shield master caution panel. So you have to operate the motor again, pull it shut, click on the handle, and then that is the door fully closed and sealed. There are this panel here as well. I'll zoom in and just reposition the camera so we can see it. So we also have functioning step light. We control the main cabin lights and set the cabin lights to dim and the baggage light. All of these are also controllable via the tablet. And here are all those controls on the tablet. Worth noting that there's state saving for these. So if you end your flight with the covers and um, the covers, engine cover, pitot, and front cover on, that will remember that for the next flight. The one thing it won't do though is if you leave the cabin door open, that will not be open when you start your next flight. Uh, Also, the shades are closed by default, and that's not state saving as well. You can open them individually in the cabin, or you can just click this and it will open them all. And the same with all the animated tables. We've now translated the camera back into the cabin just to show you how you can manually do some of those things. So the shades, say, all closed by default, but you just click on them and they will open. Quite noisy when you use the tablet to open all of them at once. The tables, there are 3 tables that fold away. And again, just big click spots on them. And part of your pre-flight would always be to make sure all the shades are open and tables are stowed away. There are passengers also that once you load them via the weight and balance page or the EFP, they will come on, they'll appear in the appropriate seating. And there's individual passenger lighting as well, which you can turn on or off with these controls here. The vents aren't illustrated. There's also overhead panel lighting as well, and that can either be at full brightness or dim. To have it on dim though, you have to turn it on first and then switch it to dim. And you'd obviously dim them when taking off for landing. And that's pretty much it for the cabin, other than to say there is behind this curtain is where the baggage, the pressurized baggage stowage is. So the bags have to be loaded first and stowed into that area. I imagine in the real aircraft, the seat must fold down. Otherwise, you'd never get big suitcases or things through that little gap there. But yeah, the bags all go in there and they are animated. Well, not animated, but if you do load them, the bags will appear in there. And here's a still image that I took before of what it looks like to have the bags loaded. Turning to the cockpit layout now, just start by saying 2 things. First of all, it'll really help familiarize yourself with all the switches and controls if you turn on cockpit tooltips. How do you do that? Well, we will hit escape. We'll go to general options, accessibility, and we have instrument tooltips. You can turn that to instant. And if you put on the description as well, it will tell you a little bit more about how to operate the control. And there are some where there's a couple in the cockpit where there are, if you use a right click, it will give you access to something else as well. And we can now see that we've got information about each switch when we turn it on. Obviously, I've got this in the lock mouse interaction mode as well, which again I find helps learning the aircraft because it will illuminate all the clickable spots. And maybe worth using that when you're learning the aircraft, and then if you prefer using the classic mouse interaction, which doesn't illuminate the instruments in blue, you can revert to that once you become more familiar. So I've turned the tooltips off now just so I don't have lots of boxes popping up obscuring what we can see. And from this view here, we can pretty much see everything in the cockpit. Let me sort of work from left to right. So on the left hand, we have the pilot sidewall, where we've got the EFB. That's the big click spot there for the EFB, the mount. There's lighting controls, pressurization controls. We have the left side circuit breaker panel. just see part of it here. It extends further back. You can see it sort of mirrors the right-hand side. This whole area here, this is the main panel. We have the throttle quadrant here, which is this area here. Then below it, this is the fuel selection and management panel. And then down here, this is the center pedestal, which contains important controls for yaw damper, the trim system and trim position indicators, as well as COM2 and NAV2 radios. Above it, I'll just zoom in a little bit now so it's a bit clearer. We can, this is the annunciator warning panel for the master warning system here. And then this is the 530 auto flight control system or autopilot panel here. And then we have these engine fire handles. And then above here, this is for the panel for controlling the thrust reversers. On this side, we have the co-pilot sidewall, which is again got quite a lot of the same controls. They're not identical though. We have these reading lights, but we've also got the control for the wing light there, which is functional. And we can see that we've got our two control wheels left and right, and they are hideable by either clicking this click spot here in a pen, or on the side of the yoke there are in both of them a click spot here. And then to return them, you can either use the pen to return them, or there's a click spot down here. We'll bring them back. There are no, apart from the whiskey compass here, there's only some air vents. There's nothing over, no overhead panels in this aircraft. It's all on the main panel or on sides, but nearly everything is on the main panel that you're going to be using. Just finally, I'd say this is the panel as it looks like, the main panel with the GTN TDS GTN 750 avionics variant, and it looks slightly different if you have the 530 or the GTN 750 NXI by TDS variant. So the manual shows what those different variants look like. I'm not going to cover what the yoke layout or the control wheel layout, because I covered that in part 1 with the control binding setup. And that is an overview of the main features of the cockpit. What I'll do, rather than doing in this video, but I'll go through the different elements of all the switches in a following video, but I will just cover the main sectors on the main panel now, and I'll hide the yokes just to help. So on the left here we have the radio panel, left radio panel. We have then what is known as the pilot panel, which has got our primary flight instruments. Got the anti-ice panel here and fuel computer panel. This here is all to do with engine starting, generator control. We have then here test panel, and this knob here is forms a useful function for doing testing lots of different aircraft systems. Just coming in here, we have some temperature with a flat position indicator, and then we've got temperature sensors for the wing and the horizontal stabilizer, and then an overall temperature, cabin temperature, I understand, indicator. Navigation panel here, so it's obviously got the TDS, the GTN 750 screen and weather radar screen. Above that, engine panel with all the engine instruments and a standby altimeter, I should say. The standby attitude indicators here, and that's the standby airspeed gauge there. Oh no, that's the co-pilot's airspeed gauge. Then this side here is the co-pilot's panel, just the same as the pilot's panel. And then we've got the pressurization panel here, and then climate control here, and then exterior, a lot of the exterior lighting controls are here, as well as some more pressurization switches, and then the right radio panel. The aircraft is rated for two pilot operation. It's not designed for single pilot operation, which is why quite a lot of some of the switches, important switches, are over on the right hand side, not immediately accessible to the pilot, which can make flying in the virtual cockpit a little bit more challenging as you're doing it on your own. So again, if you can get some of these important, particularly the light switches, if you can get them bound to a key or a button on an external device, that can make your life a lot easier. Well, that just about covers everything for this video. Finally, you can see that I've connected the GPU via the tablet, and that will create a nice little animation of the GPU connected to the right port. The GPU that you can just see in front of the aircraft, that's a GSX GPU. If you also, there is a custom fuel truck with hose as well that comes with the aircraft. So if you use the ground services menu in the MSFS ATC menu, a truck will appear and connect a fuel hose to the wingtip tank, and the filler cap will come off. That's pretty neat. I can't seem to ever get MSF to bring a fuel truck though, not sure why. It's maybe something to do with GSX. But anyway, we'll be getting more into the aircraft systems in the next tutorial. So until then, thanks for watching and see you next time.